There are evenings when the world feels quieter than usual, as if every sound has softened just enough for the heart to be heard again. Tonight, I want to invite you into such a space, a gentle corner of the world where a father once wandered in silence, unsure of how to return to himself. His life had been moving like a dim lantern, still glowing, but only barely, until an unexpected moment, fragile as a candle flame, transformed everything. It began not with grand gestures or dramatic change, but with something small, almost weightless, the slow sway of a little girl dancing in a living room filled with dust-speckled light. Before we step into that memory, take a breath for yourself. Let your shoulders soften. Let your thoughts settle like leaves finding their place on still water. If this is your first time here, I'm grateful you found your way to this quiet corner. If you feel drawn to stories that heal, soothe, and invite you back to your own center, feel free to subscribe to Mindful Path for more soulful moments like this. And now, when you're ready, let us walk slowly into this father's world, where a hidden ache had been quietly shaping his days. The man we're about to meet didn't look broken from the outside. Most people don't. He carried his routines the way one carries an old coat, worn, heavy, familiar. Yet beneath that surface was a silence he didn't know how to name. And somewhere inside that silence, a child waited for him, hoping he would find his way home again. So let's begin this journey with patience and gentleness, letting each detail settle like warm light spreading across a room. There was a time when Martin Hale woke before sunrise every single morning, just to watch the pale gold light stretch across the kitchen tiles. He used to say that dawn felt like a promise, quiet, but certain. But ever since the accident, those early mornings had become something he tried to avoid. The light felt too honest now, too revealing. Instead of waking early, he learned how to sleep past everything, burying himself under blankets as though the world might simply forget to call his name. People in his small lakeside town still greeted him with familiar warmth, the kind reserved for someone everyone knew as dependable. But grief has a way of teaching a person how to perform, and Martin performed well. He moved through grocery aisles slowly, nodded politely to neighbors, answered every "How are you?" with the same tired half-smile. From the outside, he was a man making it through, steady, calm, surviving. But inside, he was unraveling thread by thread, one silent day after another. His house, once filled with the clutter of family joy, half-finished art projects, scattered shoes, the crisp sound of laughter bouncing off the walls, began to feel like a museum of absence. He avoided opening certain drawers. He avoided looking at photos for too long. Even music felt dangerous. One melody too close to memory could undo all the fragile composure he'd built. So he chose quiet. Long stretches of it. Entire evenings spent sitting on the couch without turning on a single light, just listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the hallway clock. His daughter, Lila, was only 6, but children understand more than we often admit. She watched him move like a dim star drifting further from its own orbit. She learned to step softly around him, not because he was harsh or distant, but because his sadness filled the room the way fog slides into a valley, slow, silent, difficult to grasp. He still made her breakfast every morning, still packed her small lunchbox with little notes drawn in blue pen, but the warmth in those gestures had thinned. She felt it. Children always feel when love is present but muted. Every night, Martin tucked her into bed, brushed her hair back from her forehead, and whispered a promise he could no longer fully believe in, "Daddy's right here." But even those words felt like leaves falling from a tree too late in the season, brittle and unsure. Lila sensed the distance. She sensed the weight. And yet she kept trying, offering her drawings, her stories from school, her clumsy jokes. He smiled, yes. He always smiled. But the smiles were soft and faint, almost fragile enough to break. Martin often sat alone in the living room after she slept, turning his wedding band slowly on his finger. The ring had become a small, heavy reminder of everything he'd lost, everything that used to anchor him. He wanted to be the father he had once been, present, joyful, open, but grief reshapes a person's inner landscape in ways that make simple emotions suddenly feel like mountains too steep to climb. Some nights he walked to the edge of the lake behind their home. The water carried the moon like a careful secret, trembling with each passing breeze. He would stand there, breathing in the cold air, trying to find even a single clear thought inside all the noise. But grief is not noise, it is silence. Dense, unyielding, echoing through the ribs. Even so, life around him kept moving. Birds still gathered along the fence at dawn. The world still shifted from season to season. His daughter still searched for him with hopeful eyes. And deep down, somewhere beneath the layers of sorrow, there was a pulse inside him that had not given up, though he could no longer feel it clearly. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have predicted, was that the thing that would tug him back toward that quiet, stubborn pulse wasn't advice from a friend, nor a sudden breakthrough, nor a therapist's steady words. It would come from something far smaller, gentler, and unexpected, a moment so ordinary it could have passed unnoticed. A moment sparked by the soft footsteps of a child and the delicate courage only a young heart could offer. But that moment had not arrived yet. For now, Martin remained adrift, suspended between who he used to be and who he feared he might never become again. Lila had always carried a kind of quiet brightness, the kind that didn't need attention to be seen. It shimmered in the way she hummed while tying her shoes, in the way she stopped to inspect every dandelion as if it were a tiny miracle, and in the way she tracked the changes in her father's face the same way other children looked for shapes in the clouds. She didn't have the words to describe what she noticed, but she felt it, the way his eyes drifted, the way his hands moved slower than before, the way his laughter sounded more like an echo than a sound. She didn't understand grief, not really, but she understood softness. And something inside her whispered that softness was the only bridge she had left to reach him. After school, Lila often wandered into the living room and placed her drawings on the coffee table right in front of where Martin sat. She never announced them or demanded his attention, she simply left them there like breadcrumbs, hoping he might follow the trail back to her. Her drawings were always bright, fields of yellow flowers, towering trees with oversized leaves, houses with windows so big they looked like they wanted to let the whole world in. And almost always, in the corner, a small figure holding the hand of a taller one. She didn't circle them or write labels. She didn't need to. The figures were always them. Martin would look at the drawings, smile weakly, pull her into a brief hug, and thank her. But she felt it, the way his voice trembled, the way his arms folded around her like someone hugging a memory instead of a child. Each time, she tried not to let the disappointment settle too deeply. She knew he was trying. Even at 6 years old, she could tell when someone was fighting invisible things. One Saturday afternoon, while rain tapped softly against the windows, Lila decided she needed to try something else. She dragged out her little speaker, the one shaped like a strawberry, and placed it gently on the floor. She scrolled through the songs she liked, songs with light melodies and soft drums, and found one her mother used to dance to while cooking. A song with a slow, swirling rhythm that lifted and dipped like a feather caught in air. She didn't fully remember the steps her mother used to make, but she remembered the warmth. And warmth, she thought, might be something her father needed more than words. She pressed play. The first notes drifted through the room, curling around the furniture, moving like a breeze through an open door. Lila stepped onto the rug, bare feet sinking into the soft fibers, and began to sway. Not in any particular style, just the natural movement of a child allowing her body to follow whatever the music whispered. Her arms floated, her hands traced invisible shapes, her tiny frame spun in slow circles. Every turn was gentle, as if she were trying not to disturb the sadness that lived inside the house. From the couch, Martin watched. At first, distantly. His eyes tracked her the way one watches snowfall, soft, curious, without expectation. But then something shifted. Maybe it was the song, maybe the rain, maybe the way her hair swayed like a small flame, but something in him softened. He straightened slightly, elbows resting on his knees, gaze following her more intently. And for the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about what hurt. He was simply watching his daughter exist, light, free, unburdened. Lila didn't rush toward him. She didn't beckon or speak. She just kept moving, slow and steady, letting the music guide her. She had no plan beyond this moment. She didn't expect him to stand, or smile, or burst into tears. She just wanted him to feel something. Anything. Something that wasn't heavy. She spun again, soft as breath, and her little feet brushed against the carpet in a whispering rhythm. The living room, once so still, began to feel alive. The walls seemed to breathe a little. The air warmed. Even the rain outside quieted as if leaning in to listen. At one point, Lila glanced at her father. Just a brief, careful glance. And in that second, she caught something flickering behind his eyes. Not joy, not yet. But a spark. A glimmer. The kind of light that appears right before dawn, faint but determined. She didn't smile. She didn't want to break the spell. She simply turned again, arms floating outward, offering her father a world without language, a world small enough for him to step into whenever he felt ready. She didn't know that this moment, tender and wordless, would become the hinge on which his entire life would turn. She didn't know that she was leading him, gently and unknowingly, toward the very edge of his healing. She just kept dancing. And Martin kept watching, the walls around his heart beginning, only barely, to shift. The music drifted through the room like a soft tide returning to shore, carrying something fragile on its waves. Martin didn't stand, not at first. He simply watched as Lila continued her quiet dance, her small arms moving with the kind of trust only children possess, the trust that says, without saying anything at all, that love can still find its way through the cracks. The lamp beside the couch cast a warm, honey-colored glow across the floor, catching on the threads of her dress as she twirled. She looked almost weightless, like she had been carved from light. She didn't move with technique or precision, she moved with the simplicity of a heart that did not yet know how to guard itself. Every step she made seemed to speak to something deep within him, something he had long believed was beyond reach. Martin felt it first in his chest, a tightness, like a door he had closed long ago was trembling under its own forgotten hinges. The feeling frightened him. His breath stuttered. He leaned forward, elbows digging into his knees, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles blanched. He tried to steady himself. But something inside him had slipped out of the cage he'd built, and it wasn't willing to return. Lila's movements grew slower, softer, as if she sensed the shift without needing to look. She lifted her arms with the delicacy of a bird testing the air. She spun again, but this time her turn ended facing him, her small body still swaying to the music. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. She simply held his gaze with a calm so pure it undid something inside him. Martin blinked, and the world blurred. He pressed the heel of his hand against his eyes, ashamed of the tears gathering there. He had grown used to silence, so used to it that this small, tender offering from his daughter felt overwhelming. But he didn't look away from her. Something kept him anchored to that moment, fragile and luminous. The song reached a gentle swell, a soft rise of strings and distant vocals, and Lila extended her hand toward him, small, open, patient. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't a request. It was an invitation. He stared at her hand, unable to move. His thoughts churned with fear, guilt, longing, emotions he had avoided for months because he believed they would crush him if he acknowledged them. Yet here they were, surfacing not with violence, but with the quiet insistence of a child's hope. He inhaled shakily. His chest ached. But he placed his hand in hers. The moment their fingers met, something shifted, subtle, warm, like a single beam of light piercing a closed room. Lila's small hand tightened gently, guiding him off the couch. He rose slowly, feeling unsteady, as though he were learning how to stand for the first time in ages. She stepped backward, drawing him into the center of the living room. The music swirled around them. Martin didn't know what to do, his body stiff, unsure. But she began to sway again, tiny steps in a simple rhythm, and he followed her lead without thinking. Not gracefully. Not confidently. But honestly. Their shadows, one tall, one small, moved across the wall in uneven, trembling patterns. To anyone else, it would have looked clumsy. Yet for Martin, each hesitant step felt like a crack appearing in the stone around his heart. With every movement, a little more light seeped through. At one point, Lila lifted both her arms and spun beneath his hand, her laughter, a soft, airy sound, escaping before she could hold it back. It wasn't loud or exuberant. It was the kind of laughter that fills a room without trying, the kind that reminded him of mornings long before the world had changed. And something inside him finally broke. A sound escaped him, something between a breath and a sob. He covered his mouth with his free hand, shoulders shaking. He turned away, ashamed, but Lila stepped closer, placing her head gently against his side. She didn't ask what was wrong. She didn't try to fix anything. She simply stayed there, letting him crumble in the safety of her presence. His tears fell, quiet, warm, years overdue. He squeezed his eyes shut, letting the grief he'd imprisoned finally spill out. Lila wrapped her arms as far around him as she could, which wasn't far, but it was enough. It was more than enough. The song faded, replaced by the soft hush of rain outside. Martin knelt so he could hold her properly, their bodies folding into a tender, imperfect embrace. His hands trembled as he ran them through her hair, and for the first time in so long, he felt something real, solid, alive. "I'm here," he whispered, his voice breaking on the words. Not a promise this time, just the truth. Lila didn't respond. She only breathed slowly against his chest, the way a child does when she knows everything important is finally happening without needing to be explained. He realized then that she hadn't been trying to make him dance. She had been trying to bring him back home. And through that small, simple act, through the delicate sway of her little body, through the courage of her quiet heart, she had succeeded. The house felt different in the days that followed, lighter in ways Martin could not fully name. Nothing dramatic changed. There were still mornings when the weight of memory pressed against his ribs, still nights when sleep came slowly. But something had shifted. The air no longer felt as tight. The rooms no longer echoed quite so sharply. And when he looked at his daughter, he no longer saw her through the fog he had been living in, he saw her clearly, the way sunlight falls across a window and reveals everything it touches. He found himself lingering more, at breakfast, during her after-school stories, while she colored at the kitchen table. He began listening, really listening, to the small details she loved to share. The way her teacher's glasses always slipped down her nose. The way the clouds looked like marshmallows that afternoon. The way she wanted to learn how to spin like the ballerinas in the videos, even though she always got dizzy after 2 turns. He smiled more, not the thin, polite smile he had worn for months, but a softer, deeper one that rose naturally, unforced. Some evenings, when rain tapped quietly on the windows, Lila would take out her little strawberry speaker again. She never asked if he wanted to dance. She simply placed it on the floor, pressed play, and waited to see if he would come. And he always did. Sometimes he swayed with her, sometimes he just watched, hand resting on his knee, heart warm in a way he hadn't felt in years. What mattered wasn't the movement, it was the presence. The simple act of standing inside the same moment together. Healing, he realized, wasn't a finish line to cross. It was a steady returning, a slow, patient walk back to the people who loved him, and to the version of himself he thought he had lost. He understood now that grief didn't make him broken. It simply made him human. And being human meant learning how to let light back in after the world had gone dark. So he kept showing up. For himself. For her. And for the quiet, unexpected grace that had arrived in the form of a child's gentle dance, a dance that had not fixed everything, but had cracked open the door just wide enough for love to step through again. If you felt that today's story offered something meaningful or comforting, feel free to tap the like button below. And if the reflections shared on this channel resonate with you, you can consider subscribing and sharing, so more people can find their way to these gentle moments. Thank you for being here, and may your day be filled with calm energy and renewed strength.